always thought if you gave enough time, enough love, enough forgiveness, you could build something unbreakable. That's what I believed when I opened my home, my life, to Luke and Alyssa. The day they moved into the old Mitchell farm was one of the happiest days of my life. It wasn't much. 3 bedrooms, a worn porch swing, a patch of stubborn wildflowers by the fence, but it was ours. I'd spent decades holding onto it through layoffs, late payments, and lonely nights. It wasn't just a house. It was the one thing I built with my own 2 hands after the world fell apart. When Luke said he and Alyssa were getting married, I didn't hesitate. "Move in," I told them. "This land's too big for just me now." I imagined Sunday dinners under the oak tree, grandchildren playing in the fields, Alyssa helping me plant new roses by the gate. I pictured laughter echoing through these old walls again. Luke hugged me that day and said, "You're the best, Mom. We'll make you proud." I believed him. I needed to. Maybe that's why I overlooked the first cracks when they appeared. Little things at first. Alyssa replacing my kitchen curtains without asking. Luke brushing off my stories at dinner like they were silly old memories. I told myself it was just part of sharing a home, of adjusting. Love meant adjusting, didn't it? I spent that spring repainting the guest room so they could have a proper office. I bought new linen, stocked the fridge with Alyssa's favorite almond milk. I even cleared out the old barn so Luke could tinker with his woodworking projects. Every night I sat out on the porch with my tea, watching the sun melt into the fields, believing I'd done the right thing, that this finally would be my reward for all those hard years. Family, laughter, a house full of life again. I didn't see what was coming. I didn't see how the people I loved most would soon make me a stranger in the only place I ever called home. Not yet. Back then, I still believed in us. It started with little things. A new couch I hadn't picked, kitchen shelves rearranged without a word, family photos quietly taken down and replaced with Alyssa's minimalist prints. I told myself it didn't matter. They were young. They needed space. Love meant compromise, right? I kept cooking dinners, fixing the garden gate, folding their laundry when they forgot. Told myself I was still needed, still wanted. Then came Alyssa's birthday party. The backyard sparkled with fairy lights strung up in the trees. Music buzzed low from hidden speakers. Their friends, young, smiling, careless, crowded around the patio. I'd spent the whole day roasting chickens, baking pies, scrubbing the old stone tables clean. I wasn't invited to join. I stayed near the kitchen door, wiping my hands on a towel, half listening to their laughter. That's when I heard Luke's voice, loud and clear. Someone asked, half joking, "Hey, who's in charge around here?" Luke laughed and said, "That's just Mom, our live-in maid. Keeps the place running smooth." The group roared, glasses clinked. Alyssa leaned into his side, laughing like it was the best joke she'd ever heard. And me? I just stood there, still holding the towel as the blood drained from my face. Luke, my son, the boy I raised with every last piece of me, the boy I defended when the world was cruel, the boy I loved more than my own breath. He had looked them all in the eye and made me small, invisible, expendable. I turned back to the sink, hands trembling, pretending I didn't hear, pretending I didn't care. But inside, something cracked. Not a loud shatter, a quiet splintering break you don't notice until the roof caves in. And I knew, in that moment, that something between us had ended. Something I couldn't get back. Not with love, not with forgiveness. Maybe not ever. I didn't leave that night. Maybe I should have. Maybe if I had packed my bags right then and there, I could have saved myself a few more cracks in a heart already full of them. But no, I stayed. The next morning, I made coffee like always. I fed the dog that barked at me. I folded the laundry Luke and Alyssa left in the dryer. I swept the kitchen floor, careful not to disturb the fancy new rug Alyssa had ordered. Nobody said thank you. Nobody even looked up. For the first time, I realized I wasn't invisible. I was convenient. Background noise. The woman who kept the house running without asking for anything back. That night, they hosted another dinner. Friends I didn't know. Laughter that didn't include me. I stayed in my room reading the same paragraph over and over without understanding a word. Around midnight, I heard Alyssa giggle in the hallway. She just stays out of the way, she whispered, like I was a piece of furniture. Luke laughed, not a nervous laugh, not a "this is wrong" kind of laugh, a full, comfortable laugh. That was the moment. That was the moment I knew I didn't live here anymore. I waited until the house was silent, then I packed a small duffel bag, just the essentials. Some clothes, my wedding ring tucked into a corner of the bag, the photo of Luke when he was 5 years old, holding a frog he'd caught by the pond. I left the rest, the antique dresser, the quilts my mother sewed by hand, the heavy cast iron skillet I had saved for 20 years. They could have it all. It wasn't home anymore. It was a place where I'd been erased. I sat for a long time at the kitchen table, staring at the chipped mug in my hands, feeling the weight of goodbye settle into my bones. When I finally stood, the house creaked under my feet like it was sighing in relief to see me go. I walked out into the warm Texas night, the fields stretching out dark and endless around me. Nobody called after me. Nobody noticed. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to leave, not in anger, not in a rush, but because there was simply nothing left worth staying for. The apartment smelled like old carpet and forgotten summers. It wasn't much, just a borrowed space from a friend who didn't ask questions, but it was enough. Enough for now. I spent the first few days in a fog. I'd sit by the window with a cup of coffee gone cold, staring out at the cracked parking lot, trying to stitch myself back together. One afternoon, digging through the bottom of my duffel bag, I found an envelope I didn't remember packing, thick, yellowed with age. My name scrawled across the front in my mother's neat, looping handwriting. I sat down hard on the sagging couch, the envelope trembling in my hands. Inside were hospital forms, copies of birth records, and a letter. I read it once, then again, and again until the words stopped swimming. My son, the boy I raised, the boy I sacrificed everything for. He wasn't mine. There had been a mistake, a quiet error tucked away by nurses too afraid to make it public, and somehow, all these years later, I was the one left holding the pieces. At first I couldn't breathe. Then I couldn't cry. It was too big for tears, but it wasn't just the switch that broke me. It was what came after. Tucked into the last page of the file was a note my mother had added later. She'd overheard Luke once, back when he was home from college. He had gotten a DNA kit as a joke gift from a friend. He had opened the results right there in our kitchen, laughing about how nothing added up. He knew, and he said nothing. No, worse, he stayed. He stayed and smiled and called me Mom when it suited him, but in his heart, he had already packed me away like an old quilt he didn't need anymore. I folded the papers back into the envelope with shaking hands. Not because I was angry, not even because I was heartbroken. Because for the first time in my life, I realized I wasn't crazy for feeling unwanted. I wasn't wrong for sensing the distance. It wasn't my failure, it was the truth. Ugly and heavy, but it was finally mine. And once you know the truth, you can never go back. I didn't burn the place down. I didn't scream. I didn't even tell anyone what I had discovered. Instead, I made coffee. 1 cup, 1 spoon of sugar, just like I used to. Except this time, I drank it slowly, by the window, while the sun pushed through the clouds like it had somewhere better to be. I started writing again. Not for anyone else, just for me. I filled pages with everything I had never dared to say out loud. The nights I cried alone while they laughed in the living room. The meals I made that no one thanked me for. The woman I used to be, and the woman I was becoming. Then I called a lawyer. Not for revenge, for clarity. The deed to the farm was still in my name. The mortgage, what was left of it, had been paid down almost entirely by me. Luke and Alyssa had no legal claim. They'd never paid a cent, never contributed, never asked whose name was on the papers. They just assumed. So I filed the paperwork, quietly, without a single word to them. My lawyer, sharp, kind, maybe a little younger than Luke, nodded as I spoke. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. "You're doing the right thing," she said. I didn't know if that was true, but I knew I wasn't doing the wrong thing anymore. Afterward, I found myself walking past the farmer's market one morning and saw him, Matthew, my son. I hadn't introduced myself. Not yet. But I watched him help an elderly couple carry their groceries. I watched how he smiled, how he moved with quiet steadiness. Something about it felt familiar. I started going back every few days, pretending to browse, pretending I belonged in that part of town again, but it wasn't just pretending. I was observing. Not just him, but them. Luke and Alyssa. Their online lives were still polished and perfect, but the cracks were forming. Credit card debts, missed payments, desperate smiles. And me? I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready for what came next. The check cleared on a Thursday morning. Just like that, the farm, my farm, was no longer mine. I stood in the kitchen of my tiny apartment, hands wrapped around a chipped mug, watching the number on my screen. It felt unreal. Years of labor, sacrifice, quiet endurance, all of it folded into one simple transfer of funds. $395,000. No yelling, no courtrooms, just paperwork. Signed and sealed, in silence. Luke called once. I didn't answer. Alyssa sent an email. I didn't read it. By then, they knew. They'd lost something they never truly owned. I didn't celebrate, but I did buy a new pair of shoes. They weren't expensive, just sturdy, soft, and made for walking. Because I had places to go now, and I was no longer walking on eggshells. I saw Matthew again, not by accident this time. He was at the market, loading crates of tomatoes into a truck. I walked up, heart pounding. "Hi," I said. "I think we might know each other, in a way." He looked at me, really looked, and something in his eyes shifted. Not recognition, not yet, but something quieter, something open. We sat on a bench by the garden stand. I told him the story. Not all at once, not everything. Just enough. His brow furrowed. He asked questions. He didn't run. When I finished, he was quiet. Then he said, "That's a lot." I nodded. "I know. I don't expect anything." He paused, then smiled, soft and sad. "You're here. That's something." It was more than something. Over the weeks that followed, we shared coffee, stories, moments. He didn't call me Mom. He didn't have to. He saw me, and I saw myself again. One afternoon, I donated a portion of the sale to a small foundation that helps women rebuild their lives after family estrangement. No fanfare, just a quiet gesture to someone like me. I don't live in a big house anymore. I don't have a porch swing or fields of wildflowers, but I have peace. And a second chance at something that feels like home. Not a place, a person, myself. If you've ever felt like a ghost in your own home, if you've ever given everything and still ended up invisible, then maybe this story was meant for you. I'd love to hear yours. Tell me in the comments, when was the moment you realized you deserved more? And if you're watching this in silence, I see you. You're not alone.